Hi everyone, and welcome to the new installment of my weekly predictions. This is for the week of July 8th, 2019. First, let's do a quick recap of the predictions and what had happened the previous week. So as far as the market predictions, I think I was correct about 3 days out of 5, well, out of 4 really, because Thursday was a holiday and the US stock market was closed. And so Monday, my prediction for July 1st was, the prediction was that the market would go up, and it did. Tuesday, again, I predicted that the market was going to go up, and it did. Friday, again, the correct prediction was that the market would go down, and it did go down. Now, on Wednesday, my prediction wasn't correct. I thought that the market would go down, and it actually went up. Additionally, I made a prediction specifically that there may be increased news about gold and silver, and I thought that in particularly it would be valid for July 3rd through the 12th, and I guess the day before that, on the 2nd, there was a fairly large jump in the value of gold, and it was about, I guess, 2% increase. And there was also news on the 3rd of July from India that for the first time in 6 years, India had hiked the tax on gold from about 10% to 12.5%. Then I also made a specific prediction for China for July 4th through the 8th, that there will be increased focus on workforce, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and or some sort of a new goals and vision for the future. And the news that came out last week was that the chairwoman of China's Export-Import Bank on Saturday called for an acceleration of reforms to internationalize Chinese currency due to the concerns about the risks in the global, I guess, financial markets. So basically, they were concerned that the protectionism on the global scale would harm the financial sector in China. So it was interesting also that I guess it goes along with my other predictions about sort of women in leadership roles and or also leaders in finance making, I guess, either some sort of statements or being covered by the news. And it is interesting that even though this is just a prediction that was for China, that it specifically featured a woman and somebody who was, a chairwoman of a bank. But it's a minor, I guess, side note. So ongoing prediction that I had, and I still have obviously through about 2020, that there will be an increase in major earthquakes and like volcanic eruptions, as well as geopolitical sort of events, including restructuring of the governments, death or removal of the old leaders, and let's see, some collapse of old buildings or problems with, again, structures that maybe are too old or need to be rebuilt basically from scratch. So all of that is ongoing, and particularly last week we had some really precise aspects, in particular Saturn in Capricorn, which Saturn specifically rules old structures, government officials, large corporations, kind of authorities at the top, authorities that are strict, old, etc., as well as, like I said, mountains, old buildings, rocks, etc., minerals, yes, metals, etc. And Capricorn obviously is the sign that Saturn rules, and so that planet was conjunct precisely south node of the moon, which usually that occurs either a conjunction or other hard aspects such as a square, when again there's some far-reaching, I guess, events that affect a large number of people, or are known somehow to many people, so maybe it affects only one person, or maybe the impact is not wide as far as like the damage, but many people become aware of the situation. So that occurred last week, so that kind of increased for that week, the probability of such events happening. And so we did have a series of large earthquakes, 6 and 7 and above, and particularly in Southern California. Those earthquakes that happened on the 4th and 5th of July of 2019 literally saw Saturn and South Node be within just minutes of each other. But there are other news as well. There was earthquake in Vanuatu. There was one fairly large in Canada, as well as Indonesia. And there was also an explosion on the Italian island of Stromboli, where one person had died and tourists had to flee basically as rocks were being expelled from the volcano. Other potential events that, again, associated with like Pluto-Saturn conjunction being triggered by other planets. In the case that this was the conjunction was triggered by nodes of the moon. And in addition to that, we still have, I guess, the sun going, but also it was even more precise last week, square between Jupiter and Neptune. So Jupiter and Neptune square would give you events that relate to either international agreements, shipments, but also pharmaceuticals, navy, water, oil, gas, chemicals, religion, etc. And square means that there would be tensions or problems or some sort of excess of something. And again, like I said, Saturn-Pluto conjunction, especially with the nodes of the moon, indicate increased probability for major problems, especially related to old things crumbling or old individuals kind of stepping away. So we did have some news about various disasters that kind of fit both of those descriptions. So we had specifically, there was, I guess there were some fireworks that went wrong in Belarus and Minsk, and one person was killed. Then there was also a seizure of the $72 million worth of nuclear weapon materials in Turkey. So that was not really a disaster. I guess it was a disaster averted, but Pluto also has to do with nuclear weapons or materials. So certainly if this was not prevented, I guess that could have been a potentially serious problem. There was some news from India about the bus plunging to the gorge filled with water, and there were 29 people dead. Again, I'm not sure how often these things happen. I would imagine in India, unfortunately, some of these things may happen more frequently, and it's not like a unusual event, unfortunately, but something that I saw in the news. And there are also quite a few other issues. So, for example, in Siberia, there were severe floods that led to the death of 12 people, and thousands were left homeless. Again, something relates to, chemicals. Last Monday, there were some potential exposure to sarin at the Facebook mailing facility, with 4 buildings being evacuated. Also on Monday of last week, there was news about Brazil Senate including, I guess, their inquiry into the Valley Dam disaster, and they recommended 14 indictments. And again, we're talking about dam, so again, chemicals, sort of excavating things. And then on Tuesday, we had another news about dam, this time again from India. There was a dam failure, if I'm pronouncing correctly, it's the Tiwari Dam in Maharashtra. It failed due to heavy rains and flooded some villages down the stream. At least 19 people died. And of course, same day we had news about the fire in Russian nuclear submarine, with 14 seamen perished trying to basically putting out the fire. Luckily, again, nuclear disaster averted in this case again. At the same time, we also had increased news about oil per se. So specifically on Tuesday, the 2nd of July, oil dove 4% on demand worries, even though OPEC and allies have basically decided to extend the cuts. Then A few days later, on Friday, the 5th of July, oil prices rose on Iran tensions and OPEC output cuts. So either way, we had increased news and fluctuations in oil prices. And as I said, the square of between Jupiter and Neptune is ongoing, but it is somewhat separating right now. However, it will come back and become more precise in September. So we will continue having these kind of news on the background, particularly involving oil. But whatever is happening right now, it will be basically a process of reevaluation. What should be done? What should the value be? What, should there be cuts? And there will be some culmination or some follow-up actions still ahead of us in September. So getting back to the predictions and what had happened again, more news related to like all these Neptunian topics as well as disasters. So on Wednesday, the 3rd of July, Austria had announced that they had banned glyphosate, weed killer, and they became the first EU country to do so. On the 4th, on Thursday, there was some news that UK Marines seized ship with Iranian crude, going to Syria, I guess. Same time in the US, in Kentucky, there was news about a major fire that destroyed Jim Beam warehouse where 45,000 barrels of bourbon went up in flames, and that was about 1% of the inventory of Jim Beam's bourbon. And again, we have this disaster fire destroying alcohol. Again, that's something that's ruled by Neptune, alcohol and beverages in general. Same thing, we had fire, on the submarine, which has to do with both fire, of course, and the water, Neptune, but with the, sort of Jupiter making things to be on a larger scale. And basically these are very kind of good representations of these ongoing difficult aspects. Then again on Saturday, on the 6th of July, there was another news about explosion that involved a gas leak at the shopping center in Florida. 21 people were injured. And on Sunday, the 7th of July, there was news about quote-unquote chemical attack outside a pub in UK City where 10 were hospitalized. So again, we're having these kind of incidents, attacks that involved all these Neptunian sort of domains, so either chemicals or gases leaking, or involves oil, like the ship was seized, again, oil and causing tensions, or basically alcohol going up in flames, etc. So we had quite a few last week. Now specifically for geopolitical kind of changes, tensions, or leadership changes, we had continuing protests in Hong Kong, and there were also news about Lila Kopka, which I guess he used to be the head of Ford and then Chrysler, dying at the age of 94. There were also news about on Sunday, the 7th of July, that African leaders had launched a continental trade-free zone, so it would be quite a huge, undertaking. But again, this is a fairly, let's say, large-scale geopolitical event. And I, in addition to that, I also made specific predictions that, even though those were for July 8th and 9th, but the news came up on July 3rd about women, or some news about new leaders, and particularly possibly women, and or wealthy individuals, and or individuals that are related to financial industry. So we had news on the 3rd of July that there was a surprise nominee by, for the position of the president of the EU Executive Commission. So that was Germany's Ursula von der Leyen. And there's also a nomination for the head of the European Central Bank, and that's for France's Christine Lagarde. I guess that would not have been news. It's not something that I personally follow, so it was interesting to me to know that again we had news about women leaders, and specifically related to sort of financial industry. At least in case of Christine Lagarde, it was. So let's see, and yeah, and lastly, I also made predictions specifically for July 1st through the 10th that there will be an increased probability of some large corporation announcing some restructuring plans, layoffs to lower their costs or cut losses. Now, I did think that it would be most likely a corporation related to, say, mining or some steel production or a large equipment manufacturer. And I didn't hear about those. Again, I'm not necessarily in the know of every single thing that's happening in the world, but definitely there was a large, or rather big news about Deutsche Bank cutting 18,000 jobs worldwide, and that I would say definitely fits this description, and that prediction is still ongoing, so we may hear about more companies through July 10th that may potentially also announce some restructuring or some cuts to again reduce their losses, or just to start things kind of on a leaner, fresher note. So let's see, and let's talk about the prediction for this week, the week of July 8th next. And now let's talk about the predictions for the week of July 8th, 2019. For the entire week, there will continue to be a focus on anything related to Neptune, so things like oil, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, excessively wet weather, spills, oil spills, gas leaks, etc. And, maybe some poisons or epidemics of various like diseases, especially anything that's transmitted through water or like fluids. And that is something that is ongoing. The influence may be slightly less strong than maybe in the past several weeks, but it is still going to be there in the background, and it will sort of come back with more intensity in September. Another, associated manifestation may be sort of illusions or hopeful attitude or focus on religious various places, even movies, music, etc. So again, all of those, this optimism about the market doing well, or maybe some illusion about it doing well, or just basically hopeful kind of a attitude it will still be there, but it will lessen compared to, say, the level of it a couple weeks ago. But it will come back again in September, where this a new wave, I guess, of feeling positive and hopeful about the stock market, which I would associate with the stock market going up again in September, before it will start going down again after this influence passes. So let's see, another ongoing global influence that will color the entire week as well as many months to come is the Saturn conjunction Pluto in Capricorn. This would have to do with basically major geopolitical changes in the leadership, old leaders, leaders who have been in power for a long time going away, basically, whether on their own or being removed or simply passing away. And in terms of just the weather events, we may experience more sort of problematic, stressful weather events and or various disasters or accidents, as well as increased probability of earthquakes or collapses that involve like old buildings and things that are not built very well or will be more likely to collapse. And again, this is something that is an ongoing background influence, and it will continue on and off as we have sort of faster moving planets aspecting this conjunction. This week in particular, we will have the south node of the moon conjuncting Saturn, and we will have Sun basically opposing Saturn, and south node conjunction, meaning the Sun will be conjuncting north node of the moon. So that will be precise on Monday, Tuesday, so July 8th, 9th, and that would coincide usually with kind of intensification of these exact events that I just mentioned. So some news about powerful leaders, especially males, either somebody being kind of promoted or appointed, or passing away, or like I said, there being some disasters or significant earthquakes or significant sort of problems that affect large numbers of people, which has to do with like moon nodes. Usually when they come in serious, like strong aspects with slow moving planets, usually signify some serious events that affect large groups of people, so literally entire countries or large, like a city or something like that. So let's see, another ongoing influence is increased focus on banks and finance, and that is something that will have to do with basically for each individual country, there may be increased focus on kind of protecting their assets, protecting their, I guess, money, accumulated savings, and their land. So basically more care will be taken to make sure like the land is safe. Like I said, maybe last time, shipping away or sending away shipments of things that are considered basically either garbage or poisonous, or trying to kind of sort of erect the borders that are safer, or somehow just basically be more careful or vigilant, I guess, about protecting their borders one way or the other, or making sure that the land is basically clean from pollution, and that will be sort of relevant for individual countries, and that influence is especially strong through about July 28th. Another prediction that is ongoing sort of and in place this week as well as for weeks to come, that it has to do with China, and there we have increased probability, again, as an ongoing background influence of earthquakes and some potential problems, but there's problems such as like spills, water pollution, or problems in hidden places such as hospitals or prisons. But as I said, this has to do with like things that are perhaps hidden or not in the public eye, or can be easily sort of hidden just because it's not easy to diagnose those issues. Like maybe there's a poison in the water, but unless somebody actually tests the water, they wouldn't know. At the same time, there is a good time for like expanding in the areas that have to do with like healthcare, pharmaceuticals, Navy, as well as doing things that perhaps require sort of the behind the scene action. So doing things, in secrecy may be kind of more beneficial again for China than doing things in the open. So for better or for worse, whatever is happening there, and not everything may be sort of in the public eye. And similarly, like I said, for the earthquakes, if there's an earthquake, we may either not know necessarily the extent of the damage, or the damage may have to do with soil liquefaction, and or something that's not stable that has to do with water. So again, those islands maybe that they're building, or dams, or basically water erosion that maybe compromises old buildings. But again, some of these things may just not be publicly known and or actively hidden. So as far as the stock market direction, July 8th, Monday, I think that the market will go down. And actually, to make it real quick, I think the entire week, I believe it will be a down week, except maybe Friday there is a 55% chance, small probability it may go up, mostly because Friday doesn't look as sort of negative as the other 4 days of the week. So going back to Monday, there may be increased probability that it will be a large sort of the day with larger than usual trading volume or increased volatility. And particularly pre-open or in the early morning, there may be, again, increased volatility, perhaps because of the news from the US. And in the morning, the direction may be up, but turning down in the afternoon. Let's see. In general, as I said, this whole week, increased focus on pharmaceuticals and healthcare. In particular, if there are any sort of drugs that are in the news, or companies that are focused on particular treatments, it may have to do with like either sharp cuts, wounds like sustained from, say, gun wounds, or burns, or related to fever, head, migraines. And if there's a contract or sale of either related products or companies that isn't going at that time, it may go through easier than expected. Another ongoing influence that will be in place through about the 12th of July is the increased volatility in the cryptocurrencies, possibly a drop overall. So ups and downs, but maybe a drop overall, by the 12th, and that is especially strong on 8th through 11th. And there may also be at the same time increased news about gold and silver. So I would say those may go up again if they're seen as more, of a safe haven compared to cryptocurrencies, which may go down, or at least experience volatility. Like I said, as an ongoing influence, we have this strong influence in place that indicates potentially changes, like I said, in governmental higher echelons, where certain leaders may be disposed or moved, or there's some shuffling occurring, but also the same may occur in large corporations. We have heard about, I guess this was something that I predicted last week, about the Deutsche Bank doing some restructuring that included basically cutting losses and letting go like 18,000 people. And so we may hear about other sort of large corporations, established large players doing something similar, and in particular, the industries that are affected might be like large-scale manufacturing, mining, steel, coal industry, or anything that's related to like metals, minerals, and or organizations that basically are very closely tied to government and either get contracts from the government or have a lot of government, the different departments or entities, governmental entities that are using their products. So let's see. Then specifically on the July 8th through 10th, so first half of the week, there may be big announcements again about the new leaders, new financial deals, perhaps bank rates. The new leaders may be women, and or they may have to do with like financial institutions, and or they just may be wealthy individuals, and vice versa. The older leader may kind of pass away or be removed, and this new leader will be more popular than the old, and they may be sort of seen or touted as somebody who's fresh and new face, and they will be much more popular and seen as much more sort of aligned with what the population wants and is looking for in the leader. And with this kind of going with the same topic of focus on financial institutions and government, there may be announcements, like I said, about the leaders, but also perhaps about new rates or some real estate deals where banks keep their assets, as well as there may be news about the food industry and oil, and the announcement may have to do again with either changing leadership, changing governmental regulation or control, such as maybe some limits are implemented to ensure some stability, and or the organizations themselves, such as large corporations, may just decide to reorganize again to ensure kind of that they're cutting losses and that they improve stability and security of their assets. And as I mentioned already, 8th through about 10th of July, there's an increased probability of a really large earthquake. It could be this aftershock in California, or it could be pretty much anywhere in the world, but it may be something that may affect large numbers of people. Alternatively, there may be news about some attack or disaster. Again, may involve like a collapse of an old building, tunnel, bridge, and affected individuals. It's either going to be a large number of people, perhaps it's happened at some sort of venue, or it's affecting the entire, city, and or if fewer people are affected, those people themselves may be somehow famous or popular, maybe as a politician or an actor. Then additionally, globally again, the influence 8th through 11th, so again most of the week, there may be increased news about cars, IT, aerospace, airlines, telecom, social media, and communication transportation in general. We may hear about some either fast-moving objects, maybe some rockets, or even cars, maybe some new fast engine, or some power supply that makes, or a chip or something that makes phones work faster, or cars move faster, or airplanes, either moving faster or there's more of them. However, there may be increased news, not only about some, developments where something is moving faster, perhaps, is more efficient, but more importantly, there may be increased news about accidents, in particularly car accidents, especially involving electric cars and or airplanes. Again, something to do with probably power supply, battery, and or some things that are moving too fast, and it's just there's not enough power to power them, or something basically explodes because there's too much power. So some issue with the power supply and kind of the speed, or something is not, like I said, the power is not getting to that part perhaps, or it's moving so fast that basically things lead to fires. And for, say, something like a social media platform, there may be some power outages. It has to do with bad weather. In fact, there is an increased probability of weather problems relating to, again, excessive wind, tornadoes, lightning storms. So something that comes and goes, was peaceful, quiet day, and suddenly there's this, cell forming where suddenly you have a tornado and then suddenly it disappears. So things that are kind of rapidly evolving, pass through quickly, do some damage, but the damage is kind of spotty, and vice versa. The services that are, say, offered by communication transportation companies may also experience these kind of on-off delays or outages. There may also be quick agreements, like a sale of some company, maybe acquisition of a smaller IT company by a larger one, or vice versa. The deal may go through, so maybe there was a deal and there was a quick decision, oh yeah, let's acquire them, and then somebody selling the next day, the decision is reversed and the deal falls through. So there's some surprises and unexpected deals and or unexpected sort of cancellations. There may also be moves made by companies in these areas that may be either surprising or something that needs to be enacted quickly. So perhaps there's a power outage, like I said, or there's an accident, and the company needs to move quickly to address that. So maybe they release a patch, or they just have to be in this damage control mode, and they need to kind of make an aggressive move, either cut staff or change routes or ground some airplanes or make some recall for cars, because they really need to act fast, because whatever the issue is, it needs a sort of either immediate quick fix, or for some reason it's just the leaders are in a more of an aggressive move to kind of, they're more likely to take on risks, and they just kind of need to decide that they want to make changes faster, perhaps less, some check is omitted and something is moved to production faster. So lastly, for China, just for the, I guess the influence was 4th through the 8th of July, so it's still applicable to Monday, that there will be increased focus on workforce, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and new sort of goals and vision for the future. In particularly, there may be announcements about some new aggressive goals, or goals that involve military expansion, especially as it relates to homeland security, networking, internet, social media, IT, and airspace. So for Tuesday, like I said, about 60-65% of the market will go down. Wednesday, 65% chance market going down, and particularly for Wednesday, there's an increased probability of sort of that there will be a lot of focus in the news on oil, pharmaceuticals, wet weather, navy, movies, beverages, religious places, and the news may actually be positive and or about an abundance of related items. So in that case, I guess it may not necessarily be positive, like maybe there's too much water and so we have flooding, or perhaps there's a big event where maybe somebody's apprehended or ship is apprehended that has like a large supply of oil on it, or chemicals or drugs or something like that. So it's not necessarily a positive. I guess it's a positive thing if, say, there's somebody's caught with large amount of drugs or something on them. But basically it's the excess of all these Neptunian items, which if, say, it's a movie, it may be a good thing, because the movie may be more popular than at other times. But if it's too much water, it may lead, like I said, to excessive rains and floods. And similarly for oil, like I said, Wednesday there may be increased focus on it entire week, but especially on Wednesday. And the news may be that oil reserves are full, that the inventory is really sort of high at the peak at capacity, and basically that things just need to be spread out because there's just too much of an accumulation of that item or the commodity. And there may also be increased news about some drug. Again, this could be positive, especially if it relates to women or motherhood, that it performs well, that it's doing what it's supposed to do, that it's basically favorably looked at and is approved. So that's another possible manifestation. Thursday, it's about 60 to 65% probability that the market will go down. And Friday, as I said, maybe a slight chance, 55%, that it will actually go up. Again, mostly because it doesn't look as bad as the rest of the week. So let's see what happens. Again, I'm recording this on Monday afternoon, so I think the market on Monday was already going down. But I haven't seen any major earthquakes, but I think there's still a good possibility. And I would look for major events, if not earthquakes, and perhaps some other disasters or shuffling in the government or in large corporations through about the 10th. And also as far as the potential kind of concerns about finance and or earthquakes and or reshuffling in the governments or restructuring in large corporations, something that may come up, the same sort of topics may come up again on July 16th through 17th, and at that time I think those days may be more likely to see a market drop as well. That's just a little heads up there. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this prediction video and you will come back for more. You can also check out my blog at tolstonka.com, where I post these predictions usually on Sunday, every Sunday. Okay, so catch you guys later. See you, bye.